So, as promised, here is a video, and it's probably been a long time, about what Kathy has watched. Welcome, everybody, old and new subscribers, and thank you as always for tuning in. Your viewing and your comments is deeply appreciated. So let's jump into what your girl has watched recently. Depending on your age, you will have watched not just, TV shows and movies and box sets on TV, but presumably you'll have watched, a lot of stuff insofar as what's going on in the world. And I'm a boomer, so people of my age, we always play the game, where were you when this happened? Where were you when that happened? And we play this game in a historical sense. So, a couple of nights ago, I watched a movie that brought to mind where I was when this happened. And it's based on a true story. And it was one of the best movies I've ever seen, insofar as those films that always say based on a true story. Having said that, this was also a film that is little known, and I don't think I would have discovered it were I not a YouTube content creator. It just popped up in my recommended videos. And the film I'm talking about is from 2016, and it's an American biographical film written by Walter Vincent and directed by Jeremy Prof, and it's called The Lennon Report. And it's based on what happened the night John Lennon was shot. December 8th, 1980. I remember where I was. I was back in my childhood home because circumstances, life, led to my moving back into my childhood home, into my childhood room, and I'd been there for maybe a week, and I had everything set up, and I'd gotten a cable connection. It was pay-per-view at that time. That's what it was called in Cleveland, Ohio. I got it run to my bedroom downstairs, and I was watching the news when it came up that John Lennon had been shot. And I freaked. Who would shoot John Lennon? It was as astonishing to me as it was to millions of people around the globe. And we all know how the story ended. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the doctors and nurses and emergency staff at Roosevelt Hospital, he died. What's amazing to me right now is discovering this film and how little it's known. It's the best film I've ever seen in terms of being true to the subject matter, because the people in the film This film centers solely on what happens from the moment he was brought into the ER until the moment the story broke and his death was announced. And at the very end of the film, you get to see the actual people. They're named in the film and they're played by actors, but at the end of this film, you get to see the actual surgeons and the ER nurses and all the real life people who were involved in trying to save John Lennon's life. I can't lie. I cried from the moment I cried from the scene where they bring him in to the ER until the end of this film. I'm speechless, really. All I can say is it was a really good film. However, a painful watch it was for me. Because, like the journalist who broke the story, his name is Alan Weiss. And he's in the film too. And the story was only broken to the media because of him. The same night that Lennon was shot, Alan Weiss was involved, this journalist, in a motorcycle accident. And they arrive at the hospital at the same time. And he's lying on, a stretcher in the hallway as they bring John Lennon in. And he happens to hear the police who bring him in, because he's not brought in by ambulance. The ambulance comes, the police comes, and everybody is like, that's John Lennon. So the police bring him in. So he's there when this happens, and he happens to overhear the police say, this is going to be, this is major. This is going to be hell. It's John Lennon. And as a journalist, and he explains this at the end of the film, because throughout his life, he's taken a lot of shit for this. He was like, I broke the story, but I broke it because John Lennon was my childhood. He was my youth, and he was the youth for a lot of people globally, their childhood. They needed to know. So this journalist, even though he's severely wounded from this motorcycle accident and his determination to break the story, he gets off of his stretcher and he crawls along the hallway because he doesn't want to break it until he's sure. And he manages to, look into the room where they're operating on Lennon and verify that that indeed it is John Lennon. And maybe he shouldn't have done that. And when you get to the end of the film and they talk to the real life people who were involved and they're all still alive, he explains, I loved Lennon. And I was a human. I'm a human like everybody else is a human, but I always thought of myself first as a journalist and then a human. Anyway, it's a sensitively told, excellent film, which, if I'm just discovering it after a lifetime of watching films, it begs the question, why is it so little known? Anyway, even though it's sad, it's well worth watching. The Lennon Report, 2016, and you can watch it on YouTube. Enough said about that. If today is your birthday, Happy birthday. If life is not treating you well, don't worry about it, baby. I promise you it's going to get better. I just went through 2 weeks of hell and it got better. So don't worry. Things will get better. And until I drop my next video, stay safe and live well. Thanks for watching.